I had cameras installed all over my house. Not because I was paranoid, but because I lived alone and it made me feel safe. The system was simple: one camera in the living room, one in the hallway, another in the kitchen, and one in the bedroom. They were all connected to my phone, sending me notifications whenever motion was detected. Most of the time, it was just me moving around. Sometimes a shadow from outside would set it off. Nothing unusual. But that night, everything changed. It was around 11:45 p.m. I was in the living room, watching TV, half dozing off when my phone vibrated on the coffee table. Motion detected in the bedroom. My heart rate spiked. That didn't make sense. The bedroom door was locked from the inside. I always did that before leaving the room, a habit from childhood. The only key was in my pocket. I grabbed my phone and opened the app. The live feed loaded, pixelating for a moment before stabilizing. The room looked just as I had left it: neatly made bed, nightstand lamp turned off, closet door slightly ajar. Nothing moved. I frowned. Maybe a glitch. Maybe a shadow shifting as cars passed outside. I exhaled, shaking my head at my own paranoia, and closed the app. Then the phone vibrated again. Motion detected in the bedroom. I opened the feed once more, my hands colder this time. The room looked the same. Except the closet door. It had been slightly ajar before. Now it was wide open. My stomach tightened. I strained my eyes, trying to see inside the darkened closet. No movement. No sound. Just stillness. I slowly turned my head toward the locked bedroom door across the hall. I was alone in the house. No windows were open. No way in or out. And yet something was inside that room. I sat frozen, staring at the screen, my breathing slow and shallow. The bedroom camera feed remained still, too still. The closet door was now wide open, revealing only darkness inside. I didn't remember leaving it like that. I was sure I had only cracked it slightly. My thumb hovered over the app, switching between live view and recorded clips. The previous notification, the one that had first detected motion, had a short video attached. I pressed play. The clip was grainy in the dim light, but it clearly showed my room, empty at first, then the closet door moving. Not fast, not jerky. Just a slow, deliberate creak as it swung fully open. I felt my pulse hammering in my throat. A dozen rational explanations fought their way into my head. Maybe the door had been off balance. Maybe air pressure from somewhere else in the house had nudged it open. But my windows were closed. The bedroom door was locked. There was no draft. I swallowed hard. I needed to check. I stood slowly, my knees feeling oddly weak. The hallway light was on, spilling a soft glow against the bedroom door. I approached it, reaching into my pocket for the key. My fingers trembled as I slid it into the lock. It turned with a quiet click. The moment I twisted the knob and pushed the door inward, a wave of cold air rushed out, unnatural in the heated house. My eyes darted to the closet immediately. The door stood open, just like on the camera. The darkness inside felt wrong. It wasn't just shadows. It was deep, swallowing the weak light from the hallway. I took a slow step inside, reaching for the wall switch. The ceiling light flickered once before holding steady. My room looked normal, nothing seemed disturbed. But the closet. I could feel something watching from inside it. My breath came shallow, my fingers tightening into a fist at my side. I forced myself forward, each step measured, my ears straining for any sound. I reached the closet, hesitating only a second before yanking the door fully open. Nothing. Just my hanging clothes, a few boxes on the floor. No one was inside. The air was still too cold, unnaturally so, as if the walls themselves had soaked up something icy. I exhaled, trying to laugh at my own fear. Just a door swinging open. Just a weird draft. Then my phone buzzed. I nearly dropped it. My hands shook as I lifted it to my face. Motion detected in the bedroom. But I was in the bedroom. I turned, my stomach twisting into knots, my heart hammering so hard I could hear it. The camera was facing me, mounted in the corner of the room. The notification had just come through. My gaze slowly lowered to the live feed on my phone. My breath caught in my throat. On the screen, I saw myself standing there, in front of the closet, staring at my phone. But behind me, just inches away, there was someone else. I couldn't move. My eyes were locked on the screen, my breath caught somewhere in my throat. The figure behind me wasn't fully formed, it was shadowy, almost blending into the dim light of my bedroom. But I could see enough. It was tall, too tall, its head nearly grazing the ceiling. The shape was wrong, its limbs slightly elongated, its shoulders hunched unnaturally. It stood directly behind me, just inches away. I wanted to turn around. I didn't want to turn around. My mind screamed for me to run, but my body felt paralyzed. I stared at the phone as if not looking away would somehow keep me safe. Then it moved. Not fast. Not sudden. Just a slow, deliberate tilt of the head. As if it knew I could see it. As if it was letting me know it saw me too. That was all it took. I spun around, my heart slamming against my ribs. Nothing. The space behind me was empty. The room was silent except for my own ragged breathing. But the air felt heavy. Wrong. Like something had just been there. I whipped my gaze back to the phone, but the screen had frozen, the image distorted with static. My thumb frantically tapped to refresh the feed, but the app crashed entirely. The camera had cut out. A sharp chill ran through me. My legs finally responded and I backed toward the door, my shaking fingers fumbling for the light switch. I flipped it off, then back on, as if the simple act of resetting my surroundings would erase whatever had just happened. The light flickered but stayed on. My room was empty. But I knew. Something had been behind me. Something had seen me. I forced myself out of the bedroom, slamming the door shut behind me. I didn't bother locking it this time. My feet carried me back into the living room, where I collapsed onto the couch, gripping my phone like a lifeline. I reopened the app. The camera feed was still down. I switched to the hallway camera. It worked. The kitchen. Also fine. The bedroom offline. A deep sense of unease settled in my chest. The camera had never done this before. It had caught something that didn't want to be seen. I sat there for what felt like hours, my ears straining for any noise, any sign that I wasn't alone. But the house remained silent. At some point, exhaustion won over fear, and my body gave in. I don't remember falling asleep, only waking up suddenly, heart pounding in my ears. The room was still dark. My phone buzzed loudly against the coffee table. Motion detected in the bedroom. I didn't want to look. Every instinct screamed at me not to look. But I did. The camera feed was back. The screen loaded. The room was pitch black except for a faint sliver of light from the window. My bed was in frame, undisturbed. The closet door, still open. Then, slowly, from the darkness of the closet, something stepped out. I dropped the phone. I didn't want to pick up the phone. I didn't want to see. But I couldn't stop myself. My trembling fingers reached down, and as soon as I lifted the screen to my face, I regretted it. The thing that had stepped out of the closet wasn't human. It moved slowly, deliberately, its outline barely distinguishable from the surrounding darkness. But I could see its shape. The same impossibly tall, hunched figure. Its limbs were too long, its body shifting in a way that made my stomach churn. It didn't walk like a person. It glided, its movements unnatural, wrong. It didn't belong here. It stopped in the center of the room, its head slowly tilting, as if listening. And then, with sickening slowness, it turned, directly facing the camera. My blood ran ice cold. It knew. It knew I was watching. The thing stood there for what felt like forever, unmoving, its presence seeping through the screen. And then, so subtly I almost missed it, it took a step forward. My breath caught in my throat. Another step. I could barely breathe. Another step. It was coming closer to the camera. Closer to the door. I was shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone again. The thing in the video was now just feet away from the lens, its shape becoming more distinct, more real. I could see the way its head twitched unnaturally, the way its body bulged and stretched in places it shouldn't. Then, it stopped. For a moment, everything was still. My heart hammered, every muscle in my body screaming at me to move, to run, to do anything. But before I could react, it lunged. The screen exploded into static. My phone slipped from my hands as I shot up from the couch, my entire body going cold with fear. I was shaking, my breath ragged. And then, a sound. A single, slow creak. Coming from the hallway. I turned my head so fast my neck cracked. The house was still, suffocatingly silent. But I knew. I knew what I had heard. The bedroom door. It was opening. I was out of the house before I even realized I was moving, my bare feet hitting the cold pavement as I sprinted to my car. I didn't look back. I didn't stop to grab my keys. I just ran. I never went back. I called the police from a gas station miles away. When they arrived, they found the house exactly as I had left it, except for the bedroom door. It was wide open. And the camera? It was smashed to pieces. I sold the house. I never told the new owners. I don't check my security cameras anymore. And sometimes, even now in the middle of the night, I wake up with a horrible feeling. A feeling like someone is standing right behind me. It started with a normal night. Dinner alone as always. My routine was simple. I'd set my plate on the table, turn on a show in the background, and eat while half watching, half scrolling through my phone. It was quiet, predictable, nothing unusual. But later, when I checked the footage, I saw something that made my stomach drop. I have cameras in my apartment, Not for paranoia, just for peace of mind. A single camera in the living room covers most of the space, including the dining table where I eat. That night, I got up to wash my plate, and out of habit, I decided to review the last hour of footage. Just to make sure everything was normal. First, the video showed me sitting at the table, my back to the kitchen, eating quietly. Everything looked exactly as I remembered. Then I saw it. At first, it was just a blur. Something out of place in the frame, something my eyes didn't register right away. I leaned in closer, squinting at the screen. The camera faced me at an angle, capturing the entire dining setup, including the chair directly across from me. There was a hand resting on the back of that chair. I felt my entire body go cold. The hand wasn't mine. I had been alone. I scrubbed back, forcing myself to watch the video from the start. I sat at the table eating, alone. But then, somewhere in the middle of the recording, the hand appeared. 1 second it wasn't there, the next second it was. No movement, no indication of someone sitting down. Just a pale, unmoving hand resting on the chair across from me. Covered my mouth, my breathing shaky. My mind scrambled for explanations. A glitch? A weird shadow? But it didn't look like a distortion. It was too solid. Too real. And then it moved. Just slightly. The fingers curled, just a little, before going still again. I stopped the video. My hands were shaking. I didn't want to keep watching, but I had to. I pressed play again. The rest of the footage played normally. I finished my meal, got up, and left the table. I disappeared from the frame as I walked toward the sink. For about 30 seconds, the room was empty. Then the chair moved. The one across from me. It pulled back, just slightly, as if someone were standing up. And then the hand? It disappeared. Not pulled away. Not lifted. Just gone. I slammed my laptop shut and backed away, my pulse thundering in my ears. I had been sitting there, eating, talking to the TV, completely unaware that someone, or something, was sitting right across from me. I sat there, frozen, the laptop shut, but the image burned into my brain. That hand, that chair moving. It was impossible, but I had just watched it happen. Someone, something, had been sitting across from me while I ate, and I hadn't noticed. My apartment was small, a one-bedroom unit with nowhere to hide. No one could have been inside without me seeing them. The front door was locked. The windows were shut. I was alone. At least I thought I was. I forced myself to reopen the laptop. My stomach churned as I hovered over the video file, but I had to know. I replayed the footage, forcing myself to watch every second, looking for anything I might have missed. And that's when I saw it. Not in the reflection of the TV. Not in the kitchen behind me, but in the gap between the chairs. A shape, a faint, barely there silhouette sitting in the chair before the hand appeared. It was hard to see at first, like a trick of the light, but the longer I stared, the clearer it became. The shape wasn't solid, it was almost translucent. A vague, human-like outline. And then, at the moment the hand appeared on the chair, the shape became more defined. My skin prickled with cold. It had been there the whole time. And then, a sinking realization hit me. If that hand had been across from me, where was the rest of it? Dread pooled in my stomach. I scrubbed back to the moment the chair moved. I stared at the empty seat. My breath caught in my throat. There was no body, no person. Just the chair sliding back. Just the hand vanishing. I slammed the laptop shut again, my breathing ragged. My eyes flicked to the chair across from me. The same chair. It was perfectly still, right where I had left it. But I couldn't shake the feeling that if I stared too long, I might see it move again. Or worse, I might see something sitting there. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured that pale hand resting on the chair, fingers twitching slightly, waiting. And I kept wondering, how many nights had I eaten dinner without knowing someone else was sitting right there with me? I didn't touch the laptop the next day. Couldn't. Every time I looked at it, I felt sick. But the footage kept replaying in my head. The chair moving, the hand appearing, The thing sitting there the whole time, unseen. I kept asking myself the same question. Had this happened before? Had I just never noticed? That night, I forced myself to do something different. I left the TV off. I didn't scroll my phone. I just sat at the table in silence, staring at the empty chair across from me. The chair where it had been. I tried to ignore the unease crawling up my spine. My apartment was quiet. Too quiet. No distant sounds from the hallway, no humming from the fridge, just this heavy, pressing silence that made my skin prickle. I ate quickly, never taking my eyes off the chair. When I was done, I sat there a little longer, gripping the edge of the table, listening. Nothing. After a few minutes, I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. I was losing it. Maybe the footage had glitched. Maybe it was some weird compression error. That had to be it. I stood, grabbed my plate, and turned toward the sink. And then, scrape. A sharp, deliberate sound. I froze. My breath hitched in my throat. I didn't want to turn around. I didn't want to see. But I had to. Slowly, painfully, I turned my head just enough to see the table out of the corner of my eye. The chair. The one across from me. It had moved. Just slightly. Just a few inches back from the table. Like someone had stood up. A cold, creeping horror filled my chest. My pulse pounded so hard I could barely hear over it. I tried to stay still, tried not to breathe too loud. And then, I felt it. The unmistakable sensation of someone standing right behind me. My entire body locked up. My fingers clenched around my plate so tightly I thought it might break. Every nerve screamed at me to run, to turn, to do something. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because somewhere in the depths of my mind I knew if I turned around I would see it. And I didn't want to see it. I forced myself to move. Slow, steady steps toward the sink. I placed my plate down carefully like any sudden movement might set it off. Then, in one single, controlled motion, I turned off the kitchen light, walked to my bedroom, and shut the door. I didn't run. I didn't panic. I didn't let it know that I knew it was there. I locked the door. I got into bed. And I stayed there. I don't know how long I lay awake, heart hammering in my ears. But eventually, at some point in the night, I heard the chair move again. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I lay in bed, stiff as a corpse, listening. Every tiny creak of the apartment, every shift of the air felt wrong. Off. I told myself it was just paranoia, that I was imagining the chair moving again. But deep down, I knew better. Because I hadn't imagined the first time. Somewhere around 3 a.m. I decided to check the camera. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone and opened the app. I hesitated before tapping on the live feed for the living room. My throat was dry. My stomach churned. I didn't want to look. But I did. The feed flickered, buffering for a second before stabilizing. My table. My kitchen. My apartment. Empty. Relief flooded through me so fast I almost laughed. It was fine. The chair was back in place. Nothing was there. Maybe I'd let my mind get the better of me. Maybe? Movement. My breath caught in my throat. The feed lagged slightly, but I saw it. The chair. The one across from me. It slid back again. And this time something sat down. I couldn't see it clearly. Not at first. The air around the chair shimmered like heat rising from pavement. But as I watched, it took shape. A figure. Thin. Pale. Head slightly tilted. Watching. I felt like I was going to be sick. And then its head turned. Not toward the camera. Toward me. I dropped the phone. My body went ice cold, my vision blurred at the edges. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything. Then the floor creaked. Not from the living room. From right outside my bedroom door. I sat up so fast my vision swam. My hands clutched the blanket like it could somehow protect me. I barely breathed, listening. Another creak. Then, the doorknob turned. I made a sound. I don't even know what it was, a whimper, a gasp, something. But the moment it escaped my lips, the doorknob stopped moving. Silence. I don't know how long I sat there, waiting, listening to the deafening nothingness outside my door. Minutes? Hours? But eventually, I had to look. I reached for my phone. My fingers were numb. I opened the camera feed again. And I almost screamed. The figure. It was gone. The chair was empty. I barely slept after that. I kept the lights on. Kept the door locked. And in the morning, when I finally got the courage to check the living room, the chair was pulled back. Exactly where it had been in the footage. I don't eat at the table anymore. I don't check my cameras. I don't want to know how many nights it's been sitting there with me. Watching. I never liked the mirror in my hallway. It came with the apartment, one of those long, wall-mounted mirrors stretching from the floor almost to the ceiling. I never gave it much thought at first. It was just there, part of the space, something I passed every day without much notice. But then I saw the footage. I have a camera in the hallway, small, discreet, tucked in the corner near the ceiling. It wasn't for security, really. More for convenience. I travel a lot for work and having cameras gives me peace of mind. I usually don't even check the recordings unless something triggers a notification. But that night I had been reviewing old footage. Just skipping through, half distracted, looking for nothing in particular. And then I saw myself walking down the hallway. It was from the night before. I was coming from the kitchen, heading toward my bedroom. Normal. Nothing strange. But as I let the footage play, something caught my eye. My reflection. I was mid-step, walking past the mirror when my reflection stopped. I frowned, rewound the footage, and watched again. There I was, moving normally, but my reflection? It froze mid-step, standing still in the mirror. A sick feeling coiled in my stomach. I played it again. And again. Every time it was the same. I walked forward, but my reflection didn't. It just stood there, facing the hallway, body slightly turned, head tilted ever so slightly. Looking at me. It didn't move again. Didn't catch up. Just stood there. I slammed my laptop shut so fast I nearly knocked it off the table. My breathing was sharp, uneven. My mind raced for explanations. A glitch? A lag in the camera feed? Some weird visual distortion? But I knew. I knew what I had seen. My reflection had stopped on its own. And it had looked right at the camera. At me. I didn't want to check the mirror. I told myself it was a glitch, a compression error in the footage, something explainable. But deep down I knew. And the longer I sat there, heart hammering in my chest, the worse the feeling got. Like something was waiting. I swallowed hard and forced myself to move. One step, then another. Each footfall felt heavier, like I was walking through water. My hallway was dim, the only light coming from the glow of the kitchen behind me. And there it was. The mirror. Tall, old, streaked faintly with dust. My reflection stood there, just as it should, mimicking my every move. My fingers curled into fists. I took a breath. Nothing was wrong. The footage had to be some kind of error. But then, I moved. And for half a second, my reflection didn't. I stopped breathing. A cold sweat prickled down my back. It caught up almost instantly, like a small lag in a video. Barely noticeable. But I had seen it. And it had seen me. I don't remember backing away. My body moved on its own, my legs stiff, my breath coming too fast. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone and reopened the camera app. I switched to live view. The hallway camera flickered to life. There I was, standing in the dim glow of the kitchen light. My back to the camera. My face barely visible in the mirror. And then, it happened again. On the screen, I watched as I turned and walked away from the mirror. But my reflection? It didn't move. It stood there, frozen in the glass. Watching me walk away. I dropped the phone. I wasn't alone. I didn't pick up my phone. I couldn't. My whole body felt locked in place, my skin cold, my mind struggling to process what I had just seen. My reflection was still in the mirror. And I was no longer in front of it. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to move, to breathe. My legs felt shaky as I bent down, my fingers trembling as I picked up my phone. The camera feed was still open. I hesitated before looking at the screen, every nerve in my body screaming not to. But I did. And I wished I hadn't. The hallway was empty. The mirror reflected the space exactly as it should. My reflection was gone. For a split second, relief flickered through me. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe the feed had lagged, maybe. Then something moved. My stomach clenched. A shift in the mirror. Not me. A shape. From the bottom corner of the glass. Something was crawling up from the floor. I barely bit back a scream as I dropped the phone again, stumbling back into the kitchen, my hands gripping the counter to steady myself. I didn't dare look toward the hallway. I couldn't. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing myself to wake up, to breathe, to do anything but stand there like an idiot waiting for something I didn't want to see. And then, a sound. A soft, faint tap. Coming from the hallway. Coming from the mirror. Like knuckles rapping against glass. I shook my head, whispering to myself, trying to drown out the rising panic in my chest. Then the tapping stopped. And the floor creaked. Not inside the mirror. Behind me. In the kitchen. Right where I was standing. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The creak had come from right behind me. My fingers dug into the counter. My knuckles white. The air in the kitchen felt heavy, thick. Like something was pressing against my skin. I wanted to turn around. I needed to turn around. But every part of me screamed not to. The hallway was silent. The mirror was silent. Then another creak. Closer. I bit down on my lip so hard I tasted blood. My body was locked in place, cold sweat dripping down my spine. I needed to move, to run, to do anything. But then, a breath. Not mine. Soft, slow, too close to my ear. I snapped. My body finally obeyed, and I turned so fast I nearly lost my balance. My eyes darted wildly around the kitchen. Nothing. The space was empty. The air still. No shadows where there shouldn't be. No figures lurking in the corners. But I wasn't stupid. I knew it was still there. I knew it was watching. I forced myself to move, backing toward my bedroom with quick, measured steps. My pulse hammered in my ears. My breathing was too loud. The hallway loomed in my peripheral vision, the mirror standing right there, reflecting the dim glow of the kitchen light. I didn't look at it. I refused to look at it. I reached my bedroom, slammed the door shut, and locked it. My back hit the wall, my legs weak beneath me. My breath came in sharp, uneven gasps. And then, faint knock. From outside my door. My stomach twisted. It wasn't the heavy thud of a fist. Not someone trying to get in. It was light, deliberate, like fingernails tapping against the wood. I clenched my eyes shut, shaking my head, whispering to myself, trying to block it out. And then, through the silence, a voice, my own voice, from the other side of the door. Let me in. I stopped breathing. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't move. I sat on the floor, my back pressed against the door, every muscle in my body locked in place. I waited. I listened. At some point, the tapping stopped. At some point, it left. But I don't look in the hallway mirror anymore. Because sometimes, out of the corner of my eye, I see my reflection standing there. And it's not always doing what I am. I never used to check the live feed from my security cameras. I had them for peace of mind, one in the living room, one in the hallway, and one facing the front door. They were motion activated, sending me clips whenever they picked something up. Most of the time, it was just me walking around or light shifting as cars passed outside. But that night I checked, and I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. It was late past midnight. I was lying on the couch, half watching a movie, when I got the urge to pull up the live feed on my phone. I don't know why. Maybe boredom, maybe habit. I clicked on the living room camera. The screen loaded, showing me exactly what I expected myself. Slumped on the couch, face dimly lit by the TV glow. A blanket draped over my legs. Everything looked normal. Except for one thing. There was someone standing behind the couch. Right behind me. I froze. My body went stiff, my breathing shallow. I could see them clearly on the screen, a figure, tall, unmoving, completely still. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. My fingers tightened around the phone. My mind scrambled for logic. A glitch? A shadow? Something explainable? But deep down I knew. This wasn't a glitch. Because as I watched, as I sat there shaking, the figure moved. Not fast. Not sudden. Just a slow, deliberate shift as its head tilted to the side. As if it knew I was watching. As if it was watching me too. I couldn't move. My body was frozen, locked in place, my breath stuck somewhere in my throat. My mind screamed at me to turn around, to look, to confirm that it wasn't real, that the thing standing behind my couch was just a trick of the camera, a distortion, anything but what I knew it was. But I didn't. I kept staring at the screen, my own reflection flickering in the dim light, and the figure behind me, impossibly still, impossibly present. Then, slowly, unbearably slow, it leaned forward. My stomach lurched, my fingers went numb, the phone almost slipping from my grasp. It was bending over me, closer, closer, as if it was trying to whisper something into my ear, something I couldn't hear, something I didn't want to hear. My breathing was too loud, I realized. I was shaking so hard the screen in my hands trembled. And then, just as I thought I couldn't take it anymore, it snapped upright. Fast. Sudden. Wrong. My vision blurred from the sheer jolt of adrenaline, and I nearly dropped the phone. The figure knew I was watching. It was playing with me. I forced myself to move, just my fingers at first, just enough to swipe the screen, switching to the hallway camera, desperate to see the space behind the couch from another angle to prove there was nothing there. But when the feed loaded, the hallway was empty. My stomach turned ice cold. The couch was visible from the angle of this camera, the entire living room in frame, but there was no one standing behind me. No shadow. No figure. Nothing. My breathing hitched, my eyes darting back to the living room feed, and my blood went cold. It was still there. Only visible from one camera. Still behind me. Still leaning in. Still watching. I gritted my teeth, panic clawing at my throat, the logical part of my brain struggling against the horror unfolding in front of me. It didn't make sense. It wasn't possible. And then the thing moved again. Its head tilted further, unnatural, wrong, bending at an angle that no human head should bend. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. I needed to do something. I needed to move. My body refused to obey, paralyzed by a fear so deep I felt like a child again, hiding under the blankets from something I couldn't name. I knew if I turned around I would see it. I knew if I ran it would follow. So I did the only thing I could do. I shut my eyes. I counted to 3. And when I opened them, the figure was gone. The camera feed was normal again. No one behind the couch. No shadow, no movement. Just my empty living room, the TV flickering mindlessly, my own pale, shaking face reflecting back at me. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat, my body still trembling, my fingers still numb. Maybe it was gone. Maybe it had never been there at all. But then, just as I started to believe it was over, just as I let out the smallest breath of relief, my phone buzzed in my hands. Motion detected, hallway. My stomach dropped, my vision tunneled, my body locked up so completely I forgot how to breathe. My thumb hovered over the notification, trembling so hard I almost couldn't press it, but I did, and the feed opened, loading with a slow, agonizing buffer, pixels shifting into place, and then I saw it. The hallway wasn't empty anymore. The camera showed my narrow hall stretching toward the bedroom door, but something was wrong. The lighting was dim, the shadows stretched too long, the air in the image felt thick, and there, standing just outside my bedroom door, was the figure. It was waiting. I could barely process what I was seeing because this time it wasn't still, it wasn't just standing there, it was facing the camera. The same too tall form, limbs wrong, head slightly tilted, and now that I could see it clearly, I realized the worst part, the face wasn't there. Just a blur where the features should be, like a smudged-out photograph, but even without eyes, I knew it was looking at me. I felt my body sinking into the couch, my breath coming in short, rapid bursts, my mind screaming at me to do something, anything, but what could I do? It was standing outside my bedroom. It had moved from behind the couch without making a sound, without crossing the living room. It had just appeared there, and my body was screaming that it wasn't just a figure in the footage anymore, it was here. My eyes darted toward the hallway, dreading what I might see, but when I looked in real life, the hall was empty. My door was closed. The camera showed it open, but I could see it was shut. What was I supposed to believe? My breath was shallow, panic clawing at my chest, and then I realized something else, something worse. The bedroom door wasn't open before. It had been shut when I last checked. But in the camera feed, it was slightly ajar. Something was inside. The moment I thought it, the figure moved. Fast. A sudden, jerking step toward the camera. I choked on my own breath, my pulse hammering so violently I felt like I might black out. It was coming closer, the blurred face shifting, the static distorting slightly around it, like the camera itself was rejecting it, like it wasn't supposed to be seen. My hands fumbled with the phone, my instincts screaming to shut it off, to stop watching, but I couldn't. I was frozen, staring, unable to blink, unable to breathe. It took another step. And then another. The hallway wasn't long, but it moved slow, deliberate, like it wanted me to watch, like it knew I was trapped in my own body, unable to do anything but bear witness. And then, just as it reached the edge of the frame, just as I thought I might see what it looked like up close, the screen went black. My phone died. The battery wasn't low. It had been at 60%. It just turned off. I gasped, shaking so hard I almost dropped the device, my brain scrambling for any explanation, but there wasn't one, there was nothing, just the silence of my apartment, the emptiness of my hallway, and the knowledge that whatever I had just seen, whatever had been watching me, was still here. I didn't move. I didn't turn my head. I didn't check the hallway again. I just sat there, gripping my dead phone, staring at nothing, listening to the oppressive silence, and waiting to feel breath on the back of my neck. I sat there, gripping my dead phone so tightly my fingers ached, my ears straining against the silence, listening for something, anything, a creak, a shift, the sound of something moving where nothing should be. My heartbeat was erratic, my breath too loud, every instinct in my body screaming at me that I wasn't alone, that the moment my phone went black, something had stepped out of the camera's view, something that shouldn't exist. Something that had been standing behind me, something that had been waiting just beyond my sight. My muscles locked, my body refused to move because I just knew that if I turned my head, I would see it, standing there in the hallway, waiting for me to notice it, waiting for me to acknowledge it, because that's what it wanted, wasn't it? It wanted me to see it with my own eyes, not through a camera, not through a screen, but right there in front of me, real and inescapable. My breath hitched, my skin prickling with cold as an even worse thought crawled into my mind. What if it was already closer? The last thing I saw before the camera cut out was it stepping forward, deliberate, purposeful, closing the space between us, and now I was sitting here, blind to my surroundings, trapped in the open, completely vulnerable. And I had no idea if it was still in the hallway or if it was now right behind me. My fingers twitched, desperate to move, to grab something, to do anything, but I knew the moment I made a sound, the moment I shifted, the moment I tried to run, it would happen, it would lunge for me, grab me. Do whatever it had been waiting to do since the moment I first saw it on that screen. I clenched my teeth, forcing myself to breathe, forcing my mind to work, forcing myself to think. I couldn't sit here all night, I couldn't just stay frozen, I had to act, but every option felt like a mistake. If I ran, it would chase me. If I turned on the light, I would see it. If I did nothing, it would wait me out, because it had the patience. It had the time, and I couldn't take this, I couldn't. A noise. A shuffle. Right behind me. My body seized, a sharp, involuntary breath escaping before I could stop it, my muscles locking so tight I thought they might snap, and I knew it had heard me. I felt it react, felt the air change, the presence shift. The weight of unseen eyes pressing down on me, heavy and unbearable. I had seconds, less than seconds, and my body finally broke free from the paralysis, my instincts taking over, pushing me into motion. Before I could think better of it, I lunged forward, bolting off the couch so fast I nearly tripped. My foot catching on the rug, my balance thrown, but I didn't stop. I ran, sprinting toward my bedroom door, fingers grasping desperately for the knob, twisting, shoving, throwing myself inside and slamming it shut just as something behind me moved. Fast. The door shuddered against its weight, or maybe it was just my panic making it feel that way, my hands fumbling to lock it, shaking too hard, missing the latch once, twice, finally catching it, securing it, stepping back, backing away. My chest rising and falling in erratic gasps as I pressed myself against the farthest wall, my ears ringing with the sound of my own breath. Silence. The heaviest, thickest silence I had ever felt. My stomach twisted, my body still vibrating with terror, my mind flashing over what I had seen, what I had heard, what had been right behind me without me knowing, but I couldn't think about that now, I couldn't afford to, because I needed to listen. Listen for movement. Listen for breathing. Listen for proof that it was still out there. But there was nothing. Not a sound. My phone was still in my hand, useless and dead, no cameras, no way to check, no way to see if it had left, no way to see if it was still standing on the other side of the door, just waiting. My legs shook as I slid to the floor, hands gripping my knees, head tilted toward the door, straining, waiting, heart hammering so hard I swore it would give me away. And then, a knock. Soft. Slow. Right outside. A shudder ran through me so violently I thought I might pass out. Another knock. Then, a whisper. My own voice. Let me in. I clamped my hand over my mouth, choking back the sound that tried to escape, my entire body locking up, my breath frozen somewhere in my chest because I knew that wasn't me. It wasn't a recording, it wasn't an echo, it was something else, something that had been standing behind me, something I had seen only through the camera, something that had stepped out of its frame and was now right outside my door whispering in my own voice. I pressed myself harder against the wall, my pulse hammering so loud it drowned out everything else, but I could still hear it, soft, patient, wrong, let me in. The voice was too close now, just inches beyond the thin wood, just on the other side, but I wouldn't look, I wouldn't move, I wouldn't answer, I wouldn't give it what it wanted. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing it to stop, willing it to go away, but then the knob turned. A sharp, twisting click as the lock held. But my breath hitched because I had seen how it moved, I had seen how it had appeared behind me without crossing the room, and I knew if it wanted to, it could be inside. It was playing with me. My stomach twisted, a sick, rising dread pressing into my ribs because I realized then it wasn't trying to get in. It was waiting for me to come out. The thought paralyzed me in a different way, a cold, suffocating fear that settled into my bones because I knew what it meant, I couldn't leave. I couldn't open the door. Not now, not later. Not even if the knocking stopped, not even if it stayed quiet for hours, because what if it was still there? What if it never left? I clenched my jaw, my mind spiraling, my legs curled against my chest as I tried to force myself to think, to breathe, to make sense of this impossible, horrific thing. I had to do something. I needed proof. I needed to see. My hands trembled as I lifted my phone, pressing the power button, praying, begging for the screen to flicker back to life. Nothing. I pressed it again. Again. Still black. My breath shuddered out, panic squeezing tight around my lungs because I had seen it. I knew my phone had been charged before this happened. I knew it hadn't just died. It had been turned off. The realization made me feel sick because it meant one thing. It didn't want me to see. It didn't want me to check the cameras. It didn't want me to know what it looked like outside this door. I clutched the phone to my chest, my mind racing, my body so tense I thought I might snap apart, but then the knocking stopped. I went still. Completely still. The only sound left in the room was my own heartbeat slamming against my ribs, my breath shallow and uneven, my ears straining, waiting, listening. Silence. A long, unbearable silence that stretched on and on until I almost convinced myself it was gone, that it had given up, that maybe, just maybe, this was over. And then, a whisper. But not from the door. From inside the room. Right behind me. I see you. I didn't scream. I couldn't. The air had been ripped from my lungs, my body locked in place, my fingers digging into my legs so hard I thought my nails might break the skin. It was inside. It had been waiting. It had never needed the door. It had been playing with me, making me think I was safe, making me think I had a choice. But I didn't. I never did. My eyes flicked to the phone, still dark, still useless, no cameras to check, no way to see, no way to know where it was, only the voice, that soft, slow, almost amused whisper so close I could feel the weight of it against my skin, pressing into my ear like a breath that wasn't mine. I see you. The pressure in my chest grew unbearable, my ribs felt like they might snap, every nerve screaming, my brain fighting between the instinct to run and the knowledge that it wouldn't matter, that whatever this thing was, it was faster. It had already moved without making a sound, it had already appeared behind me once before, it had already broken the rules of reality and I was trapped in its game. My fingers twitched, my body aching to move, to throw myself toward the door, to do something, anything, but I knew the moment I moved, it would move too. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, my hands slick with sweat, my back pressed against the wall, and then, with every ounce of courage I had left, I forced myself to do the one thing I had been avoiding. I opened my eyes. And I saw it. Not in the mirror, not in the camera feed, not in a reflection, right there in front of me. It was crouched low in the corner of the room, the shadows barely concealing its twisted, unnatural shape, long limbs bent wrong, head tilted too far to one side, the blurred smear of a face watching me without eyes, and even though it had no mouth, I felt it smile. It didn't move. It didn't need to. It had already won. My pulse pounded in my ears, my entire body screaming for escape, but I was stuck, locked in its gaze, and then it did the worst thing yet. It reached for me. Not fast. Not sudden. Slow. Deliberate. A hand stretching toward my face. And then, the lights flickered. For a second, the room flashed bright, my vision blurred, the thing in the corner wavered, and in that split second, I did the only thing I could. I moved. I lunged for the door, ripping it open so hard the handle dented the wall, my feet slamming against the floor, my body launching forward before my brain could even catch up. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I tore through the hallway, past the couch, past the dead phone still lying on the floor, past the dark, silent screen of the security camera that had started it all. I threw myself at the front door, twisted the lock, yanked it open, and I ran. I didn't stop running. Not when I reached the street, not when I nearly collapsed from the cold night air burning my lungs, not even when my neighbor called out to me in confusion asking what was wrong. Because I knew if I stopped, if I hesitated, if I so much as glanced back toward that doorway, I would see it standing there. And this time it wouldn't let me leave. I never went back. I had movers pick up my things in the daylight while I waited outside, refusing to step foot in that apartment again. I told myself I was being irrational. That maybe it had been sleep paralysis or a hallucination or stress. But I knew. Because even now, in my new place, with no cameras, no mirrors, nothing reflecting back at me, I still feel it. At night, when everything is still, when the shadows stretch a little too far, when the air feels a little too heavy, I feel it. I know it's watching. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I still hear my own voice whispering in the dark. I see you. It started with the notifications, the same ones I'd gotten 100 times before, motion detected, front porch, but every time I checked the footage, there was nothing there. I thought it was a glitch, maybe a stray cat triggering the sensor, but the timestamps were strange, always at 3:33 a.m., always exactly the same time, and that's what started to bother me because randomness makes sense, glitches are unpredictable. But this wasn't random, this was intentional, this was a pattern, and patterns mean something. I told myself it was nothing, turned off notifications, tried to ignore it, but the thought festered, an itch I couldn't scratch, so the next night, I stayed up, watching the live feed, waiting, and when 3:33 a.m. hit, my breath caught in my throat because for a second, just a second, the camera glitched, the feed distorting, the image flickering, and then it was back to normal, nothing there, just my empty porch, the quiet street, but something felt wrong. Like I had just missed something, like something had been there, and the more I stared, the more convinced I became that I wasn't looking at nothing, I was looking at something that didn't want to be seen. I told myself I was imagining things, exhaustion playing tricks on me, but then it happened again the next night, and the next, always the same, motion detected, 3:33 a.m., feed flickering for half a second, then empty stillness. And the paranoia started creeping in, started gnawing at me, and I needed to know, I needed to see, so I made a plan. I would watch it live, stare at the screen without blinking, no distractions, no chance for my mind to fill in the gaps. I stayed up that night, eyes locked onto my phone, the minutes crawling by, my pulse steady but tense, waiting, watching, and when the clock hit 3:33 a.m., the feed distorted again, but this time, when it cleared, I saw it. Something was standing at my door. I stopped breathing, my body locked in place, the screen in my hands trembling as I tried to process what I was looking at, because it wasn't a person, it wasn't some stranger or a prank or a lost neighbor, it was wrong. The figure was blurred, its edges shifting like a smudged photograph, the face impossible to see, just a blackened void where features should be, and the longer I stared, the worse it got, because I realized it wasn't facing the door, it was facing the camera. It was looking at me. My skin went ice cold, my breath coming in shallow gasps, and then the feed cut to static. Just gone. No error message, no disconnection, just a wall of white noise filling the screen, and I swear in that moment I heard something outside, not the usual creaks of the house settling, not the distant hum of the street, but something closer. Something at my door. I didn't want to look. Every instinct screamed, stay still, don't move, don't check, don't let it know you've seen it, but my body betrayed me, some desperate need to confirm, to deny what I had just seen, and before I could stop myself, I was standing, moving toward the front window. Heart hammering in my throat. The street was empty. The porch was empty. But then a shadow moved. I jerked back, my pulse spiking as my gaze snapped toward the door, and in the dim glow of the porch light, I saw it, a shape pressed against the frosted glass, an outline, tall, unmoving, waiting. My stomach twisted, every muscle screaming run, but I couldn't, I was frozen, my ears straining in the silence, waiting for a knock, for the doorknob to turn, for something to happen, but there was nothing, just its presence. Just the unbearable weight of it standing there, like it knew I was on the other side, like it was waiting for me to break first. The air was thick, suffocating, and then the porch light flickered, the shadow shifting, distorting, growing, and I stumbled back, nearly tripping over myself, and then, just like that, it was gone. The light went out completely, the hallway swallowed in darkness, and in the silence that followed, I heard it, a whisper, faint, distant, let me in. I slammed the bedroom door shut, locking it, backing against the farthest wall, my breath ragged, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone. I reopened the camera app, desperate, frantic, needing to see if it was still there, but the feed wouldn't load, just spinning, buffering, like the camera itself was resisting, refusing to show me. My pulse pounded in my ears, my body tense with the crushing weight of not knowing, and then, finally, the feed snapped back on. The porch was empty. The light was working again. The street was still. But the door was open. My stomach dropped. The door. My front door. Open. Not wide, not swinging, just a sliver, a crack, a darkness bleeding through as if something had slipped inside without making a sound. As if it was already in the house. My vision blurred, my breath caught somewhere between a sob and a gasp, my fingers gripping my phone so tight I thought the screen might crack, because I knew I had locked it, I had checked it twice, I had made sure, but it didn't matter because now it was open. And I was not alone anymore. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't stay in this room, in this house, with whatever had come inside, but leaving meant walking through the hall, past the open door, past the place where it could be waiting. My whole body trembled, the seconds stretching endlessly, and then a creak. A floorboard shifting. From the hallway. My lungs seized, my mind racing because the sound was slow, deliberate, a single, careful step and then another, closer, moving toward my room. I turned off my phone screen, plunging myself into darkness, pressing my back against the wall, my body trembling violently because it was right outside. I could feel it. And then just when the silence became unbearable, it knocked. Soft, rhythmic, deliberate, 3 slow knocks against the bedroom door, and my heart nearly stopped because I could see the handle, see it twisting, see the lock barely holding as the metal trembled under pressure. I squeezed my eyes shut, shaking so hard my teeth chattered, because I knew if it got inside, if I saw it fully, if I looked directly at its face, I wouldn't be me anymore. The knocking stopped. The handle stilled. Silence. But then scratching. Light at first, then deeper, nails or something sharper dragging across the wood, tracing slow patterns as if testing the barrier between us, as if enjoying the wait. I couldn't take it. I couldn't be in here. I had to get out. I forced myself to move, to breathe, to act, my fingers fumbling with the window latch, my body coiling, preparing to jump, but then, the whisper. Right against the door, closer than before. I'm already inside. I never went back. I don't know how I escaped, I don't remember running, I don't remember anything except waking up in my car miles away, gasping for air. But I know one thing. I never opened the door. It did. And now every night at 2:38 a.m. I hear knocking. No matter where I go.